Hi guys, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kyra, and here on this channel, we love makeup. But we're all here for real makeup, for real life, and real people. Today's video is the wrap up for my 1 month, 1 palette with the abhxjackieaina palette. If you're unfamiliar, she looks like so. And I gotta tell you guys, this was a completely different experience than using the BH Cosmetics Avocado Toast palette for an entire month. First of all, I have been sick since Halloween and it is almost Thanksgiving. So there's been a ton of days that I just did not wear makeup, unfortunately. So I really feel like, in part, my heart was not into this project this month. And also, I find this palette just very challenging, if you will. But we will get more into that later in the video. I do want to share that I did create 12 plus, but 12 looks that I have pictures for you, and we are going to get into the slideshow shortly. But I also wanted to just mention how many times I used each shade and a few of those type of things. I definitely have some dips in this palette that I didn't have before. Definitely these 3 mattes here were the most used shades in the palette, along with the shade Soleil, because it makes a really good inner corner highlight. So let's talk about how many times I used each shade, and of course I'll have a graphic up on the screen for you here as well showing how many times I used each of the shades. Starting with Soleil, I used this 10 times, which was by far the most that I used any one shade. And like I said, not only is it a beautiful brightening lid shade, but it also works beautifully as an inner corner highlight for this palette. No surprise that Pinker and Supreme, the 2 pinks in this palette, only got used once from me. And I just don't like pink eyeshadow on myself personally, or if I do, it's more like dusty, muted, or even cool tone versions of pink. Big Wig I did use 2 times, and it is a nice purple. I have no problems with it. Dola's here I used twice. It's a beautiful shade as well. Credit I used 8 times. I really like this as an outer corner deepening shade, liner, lower lash line type of shade. And Lituation, I do really like this shade, but I did only use it twice. Zam I used twice. I like this shade, but I have to be very careful. It is very, very glittery, and when I get even fine glitters like this in my eyes, it causes them to itch and I have to take my makeup off. The one shade I used 0 times, again, not a surprise, is Wiggly's right here. This is a red shadow, and if there's any shadow I like less than pink, it is red. I just don't love red eyeshadow on myself, and that's okay. Shookington, the purple, I believe I used twice, but I only have it marked down as once. And again, it's a pretty purple shade, but I find that it's kind of sheer and just not my favorite purple shade overall. Trust Issues, this shade right here that looks completely white, is kind of a greenish, goldish duochrome, and I actually really learned to love this shade during this month. It's a shade that I really didn't care for upon first using this palette once I added it to my collection. So I am glad to have found a new favorite shade in this palette. Edges is a beautiful shade. It's one of my favorite type of shades to put in the crease, and I did use Edges 3 times. Sponsored, by far my favorite shade in the palette. It is a brown base with a green shift to it, and I just love this kind of shadow. Honestly, if I didn't like any other shade in the palette, I would be tempted to keep this palette just for that shade. And I did use it 3 times, but I had to resist the urge to use it like every single day. I do think my favorite look, which I'll put up on the screen now, was where I used Sponsored all over the lid and then I put Trust Issues over top. It was absolutely phenomenal. And then Ginger is the shade that I used the second most. It's great as a transition and I used it 9 times. As a reminder, I did use my C Color Savannah palette in conjunction with the Jackie Aina palette since I'm working on hitting pan in a few shades in this palette. So you will see that I use this in some of the looks. Again, I created 12 looks, so let's go ahead and get into that slideshow now, and then I'll come back at the end and give you my final thoughts after using this palette for 1 month. enjoyed seeing all of the looks that I created with the Jackie Aina palette this month. Let's just talk briefly about how I feel about the palette now after having dedicated a month to using it. I think the fact that I'm not wearing it on my eyes today might give you a clue as to how I feel, and that is I'm just tired of this palette. I kind of have the exact opposite feelings about this palette than I did when I was completing 1 month 1 palette with the BH Avocado Toast palette. That palette I felt like I loved even more after using it for a full month. I wasn't sick of it. There was no dead shades for me or any shades in the palette that I didn't want or like using. This palette, of course, is a different story. 2 of the pink shades, I mean, Supreme is not quite as bad because it is a little bit of a darker pink. This one is like a no-go for me. This bubblegum pink, I'm just not interested in putting that on my eyeballs, and I had a really hard time with the one time that I used it. And same with Wigglies. I never ended up using this one at all because I don't like red eyeshadow. I thought surely in my creativity that I could come up with a look using that red shade that I would actually like and enjoy, but obviously I didn't because I never used that shade. I am not by any means ready to declutter this palette or anything like that, but I did come to the realization that this palette limits my creativity a little bit because of there being a handful of shades that are just not my jam. I just feel a little disillusioned with this palette. I love looking at the color story, but when I actually go to create looks with the palette, I end up wanting to create the same looks over and over, which mostly involves these shades. Like taking out these 4 shades right here. This is the palette that I enjoy using. However, you're gonna get a lot of similar looks with this, so I don't have a problem with that, and I can see myself using this in the future or reaching for it in the future to create those specific looks, but not my favorite palette. I just don't feel the same about this palette after a month as I did about the BH Avocado Toast palette. So, you know, I think that's the great thing about this project is that you really do get in depth with your palette. You use it, you learn what you like and dislike about the palette more so. And sometimes I think I will come out loving the palette even more than I initially did, like I did with the avocado toast. And sometimes I'm going to come out with the feeling of just being glad to be done with this palette. I mean, again, like I said, I'm not even wearing this palette on my eyes today. I'm wearing the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz. This is the very first time that I've used it, and I was just really glad to use something else today, to be honest. Have you had this experience with a palette where a palette that you really think you like, you dive into it, you get really up close and personal with it, you use it, maybe through project panning or some kind of randomized eyeshadow project. Have you ever found yourself liking a palette less the more that you use it? That's not usually the case for me, and especially with Anastasia Beverly Hills, I tend to like all of their palettes, or at least all of the ones that I own. Hopefully this is not too anticlimactic for you guys. I wish I was able to come on here and tell you how much I love this palette and that I grew to love it even more. I definitely plan to continue with this project and continue doing 1 month 1 palette. I'm not for sure if I will do the next one in January or not. Right now, I'm kind of trying to take a little bit of a break from project panning and projects like 1 month 1 palette where I'm really not forced, but focused on using certain products and trying to just use products that I want to use right now. For one, just to get enjoyment and use out of my collection without any guidelines, but for 2, to kind of look at and decide on what I want to be doing in terms of project planning and other projects in the new year. I would love to hear all of your thoughts on today's video. Do you have Jackie Aina? Do you love the shades that I dislike? Do you dislike the shades that I love? Let me know. And with all of that said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I hope you found it entertaining or helpful in some way. Maybe you got some inspiration from this video, and that is definitely a part of why I do this project. And if you did enjoy today's video, I hope you'll give it a thumbs up. It helps other people like you to find my videos and enjoy my content as well. And I hope you'll consider subscribing if you've not done that already. And I hope all of your makeup days are absolutely beautiful makeup days. I hope you had a very happy Thanksgiving and enjoyed your time with friends and family. And I will see you in my next video very, very soon.